Hey everyone, welcome to the 36 Charge podcast. This is a podcast about competitive Warhammer 40k and the state of the game. This is episode 10, How We Got into 40k. I am your host, Chris Vo, and joining me today is Omar Q.
Hello, everybody.
And Benjamin Rubenstein.
Hello again, everyone.
So, we want to talk about how we got into 40k. What is it about 40k that appealed to us and got us interested in the universe and what we love about the hobby, and then even beyond that, just like why do we dive into competitive 40k? But before we step off on that, I just want to address like a couple of like news tidbits and rumors that came up over the last couple of days, like Terminators, Space Marine Terminators going to 3 wounds and company veterans going to 2 wounds. Normally we would talk about stuff like that, but I don't know. Benjamin, I think you can explain it better than I can why we don't really want to talk about that right now.
It's just not enough information. Like we've seen like changes to weapon profiles, like Thunderhammers are damage 4 now. Like I could talk a lot about how that infects like Centurions and Outriders and other such things, but like that whole codex is getting rewritten pretty soon. And when it does, that will be our entire podcast, if not 2, because the Ultimate Codex is coming out that week. But until then, I don't know, just like looking at a data sheet without any points, without any other rules, because we know that there'll be rules changing. It's just not enough info. Like, who knows? Those models could cost 2 points, they could cost 100. Maybe they're good, maybe they're terrible.
Yeah, and then there's also like a lot of people like trying to extrapolate from that and saying that Mini Marines are also going to 2 wounds, and so are Chaos Marines, and Havocs are going to 3 wounds, and it's really just a lot of baseless speculation. And we could talk about it for an hour, but very decent chance that is just going to be all wrong by next week. So,
we just have to talk about it again when the codex comes out, so there's no point in doing it twice.
Yeah, we can just talk about it when we actually have concrete details about it. So in lieu of that, I want like I said, I want to talk about like how we got into 40k. So the first question I want to ask you guys and to myself is, how did you find out about Warhammer, and what is it that like really just like drew you into the universe and made you want to get involved? Was it, did you see a picture of like a Space Marine and think that's the coolest effing thing you ever saw? Did you like play Dawn of War and get into it that way? Like how did you get into that? Omar, you wanna kick us off?
Yeah, so I've always kind of known about Warhammer just by being a gamer and doing stuff around that and liking RPGs. I played Space Marine at a friend's house. I played Dawn of War a few times. Like I had done the whole video game exposure, read a little bit about the lore here and there. Went on a really big TV tropes dive in like 2016, 2017 at my startup job when like in between projects. So I always kind of knew about it, but I didn't understand what it was until 2018. 2018, I broke up with a terrible, terrible girlfriend. And if like one of the 5 other people who have had a girlfriend in this hobby know, they're really expensive. And when I moved out, I was like, I need another thing to throw my money at. I talked to a friend of mine about it. He had me try to convince me to play Warhammer. And he just goes, yeah, you're single now. You should be single forever. Why don't you just buy Dark Imperium? So we went to the nerd store, Warhammer Brookline here in Boston, and I bought Dark Imperium, and I never really looked back. I play AOS now. I've got a total of 7 armies, I think.
Nice. Benjamin, how about you?
Oh, sorry. I had to mute myself to not laugh over Omar's explanation. So my first exposure to Warhammer was I was actually into competitive Magic before I was ever into competitive Warhammer. I'm not going to explain what Magic is because I think most people here know what it is because the 2 games get played in the same spaces, oftentimes right next to each other. You've all seen people playing Magic in any gaming store that you've played Warhammer in. And I was the other person. I was playing Magic, looking at people playing Warhammer. My first actual real exposure to the models was Shadow Wars Armageddon, which was GW's first attempt at Kill Team, which was kind of reasonable. And the only reason the game really died is because they decided Kill Team was supposed to be a thing instead. And I first picked up a Warhammer model. Believe it or not, the first Warhammer model I ever built was a Grey Knight Strike team. I played Grey Knights in Warhammer in Shadow Wars. That was the first Warhammer.
Hold on, before you go further, when you built your strike squad, I need to know what edition that you did that in, so I can yell at you or not.
No, I did for Shadow Wars.
Okay.
I never played them in 40k.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, so I got into 40k. Like, I had a friend down the street from me who was like maybe like 4 or 5 years older, and his older brother was into 40k, and he was telling me about it, and like he had his 3rd edition Imperial Guard Codex, and I was reading through it, and I was like, this seems like a really cool universe. And then I like read up a little bit on the lore. I read that codex like cover to cover. Like we had like 20 minutes of reading time at school every day, and you had to like bring a book and like read it. And I like a huge ass nerd, I brought the Imperial Guard Codex to read. And like after that, I think it was like 11 or 12, and like I like for my birthday I wanted the 3rd edition box set, that came with Space Marines, Dark Eldar, and like a couple of like jungle trees, and then like the 3rd edition codex rule book. And I think I read that rule book cover to cover, and just got totally engrossed in it. And then from there I started devouring the lore. And because I was like 12 years old, like I can't afford to buy models, like I'm 31 and I can barely afford to buy models now, so what I ended up doing was just reading a bunch of Black Library books, and buying codices to read them. Like I had like the Eldar one, the Dark Eldar one, the Chaos Marines, like 3rd and 4th edition one, the Tau Codex, Orcs, I think. Like I was just buying codexes and reading them. And then Dawn of War came out after I'd been reading all of these codexes and Black Library books. And when Dawn of War came out, that really cemented my love of Warhammer, just because like Dawn of War really nailed the feel and the atmosphere of what Warhammer was to me. Like the first time you hear a dreadnought in Dawn of War saying "Even in death I still serve," and it's like robot voice, like I went from like 6 to midnight after hearing that, and then I would buy models here and there, and then it kind of fell off after high school, because I ended up joining the military and didn't have any time for painting models or anything like that. And then when right after I graduated from college, I think it was like maybe like a year or two after I graduated, Omar bought Dark Imperium.
Well, no. So actually, no. That's not how it went exactly. So I was in the process of moving out, breaking up, all that fun stuff. And Chris is like, "Hey, I'm in Boston. You're unemployed. I'm here for an interview. Let me take you to lunch." We go out to lunch. We're talking. I'm like, "What are you doing with your time, man? Like, you need to be doing something. You have no project." And like, just casually I go, "Didn't you play Warhammer? Shouldn't you just start doing that again?" So I still have a Snapchat saved. So he's like, "Yeah, maybe." I think the next day he bought Dark Imperium, assembled some Inceptors, and sent me a Snapchat that just said, "Fuck you."
No. What happened was I had gone to the store, I had Dark Imperium in the passenger seat, and as I was driving home, I sent you a Snapchat of the box that said "F you."
Yeah. And that was great. And I laughed. And it was just like, you got into it real hard.
Yeah, because like I always wanted to get into a tabletop game. But when I was into Warhammer before, was a kid, I was broke. I could only afford like a $12 like paperback once in a while, and that's how I got into the universe. And then I could spend like $30 on Dawn of War.
Yeah.
So that's when I got back into the tabletop game a few years ago. And that and the streamlining of 8th edition made it very palatable to me. But yeah, that's how I got back into it. So I think the next thing I want to ask you guys is, what is it about Warhammer, the universe, the hobby that really gets your juices going? What makes you excited about it?
So the universe is just awesome. Like there's so much room for lore. So part of why I got into Warhammer 2 was I was playing D&D, and I always kind of like, whenever I'd look up DM stuff, I'd see Warhammer and hobby things and hobby videos. And the thing about Warhammer is it's an established world. We know what's up, but there's also a lot of room to play. So my chapter can be whatever I want it to be, and whatever. There's 10,000 years of lore. It's fine. But the universe itself is just insane. They take There is no kill like overkill and turn it up to 11, and I think it's amazing. I'm also a lore junkie, but what keeps me like in the hobby itself is it's a skill, and it's a very supportive community. And if it's not a supportive community, find a new game store. Because I remember painting my first models, and people are like, "Yeah, thin your paints, do this, do that," and every single time I'd like I'd iterate and iterate and iterate. And I remember, I think it was the last tournament I went to, or the one before that, where I had a mix of like a few old models, but it was mostly newer models that I painted. And people were just like, "Dude, you're such a good painter now. Look at all these great models." And it's like, it's a skill that you can feel and see in your hands. You can see it getting better. But the community is also awesome. Everyone's supportive. Everyone will compliment you. People are looking at your progress and will tell you that you made progress. It's a fulfilling thing to do. Like, the folks will come over and see my displays, and they're like, "Oh wow, you painted all of that?" It's like, "Yeah, I did." And there's pride in it. It's not just playing another video game. It's not grinding out reputation in World of Warcraft.
Yeah, I could totally agree with that. Like one of the things that appealed to me about the hobby is, again, like you said, that constant iteration and of self improvement and trying to push your technical skills to the next level and challenging yourself. And that's a
Chris, we
common.
both painted too Aramons, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and like one of the common things that I see in like my enjoyment of games and hobbies is, for example, like I like things with a very high skill ceiling because I like to be able to push myself to iterate and get better at it, bit by bit. And it's a journey of self improvement. Like, for example, like I used to play StarCraft 2 a lot. And it's one of those things where you can look at yourself and you try to improve like your macro or your micro or like your builds or something like that. There's always something to work on. And I used to play a lot of fighting games, and it's very similar thing. And then when you look at the hobby side of things, painting is like painting has an insanely high skill ceiling. There, like, I think I'm a pretty decent painter, but like I look at like Golden Demon winners and crystal brushes, and I'm just like, I don't know if I can ever get there, but like I know if I try, I can start approaching it. And that's what I really appreciate about the hobby itself. Not just like the competitive gameplay. Yeah, you can always get better like competitive gameplay and optimize like your movement and your list building or your target prioritization. But it's so much more than that. It's the actual hobby itself, and then you can even just like work on improving your knowledge of the lore.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So the thing that got me into the game, the thing that first hooked me was just the models. I saw someone painting a Necron Night Scythe, which is not a particularly competitive model, but it looks sweet. And I was like, oh man. And I'd played Shadow Wars at this point, and I was like, you could play with like big things in 40K. All right, I'll have to look into that. And I'd always kind of wanted to try out wargaming, and I had never really had the time because in high school I was really into competitive Magic, and I didn't really want to drop that. And in college I studied science, and therefore had no free time. And I kind of found myself a little bit more time after college, and I figured, yeah, I'll get into that. And I enjoyed the hobbying. I enjoy building models. And the painting's fun. I try to push myself on painting, but I struggle with it for a lot of different reasons. And and it's also a little disappointing because my fiance she's a commission artist. Is one of the things she does, not for 40K models, but for like pictures, like portraits and things like that. But of course, that does translate to painting models. Whenever she sits down and paints my models, it's like, oh, cool. I've been trying this for 5 hours, and in like 10 minutes, she can make a model look way better than anything I could ever do. And so you can tell the difference between like my line troops and my characters because she's done all the characters and I've done the line troops. But I don't know. I definitely like Omar said. I really enjoy the getting better at things. Like if you look at my armies, if you've ever played against my Tau, like they look fine. They're not beautiful. They look fine. If you look at the plague bearers I have, they look pretty good. And it's just like it's just a lot more of just I had a lot more experience with by the time I got to those.
Yeah.
So yeah, I enjoy increasing the hobby, but I mean, the big thing too for me is like Chris said, skill ceiling. Although for me, I'm a little more focused in on the skill ceiling of the actual game. Although I know you guys are as well as competitive players. But that's what's one of the things that sort of kept me in the game is like, wow, you just keep getting better. There's not really it's not really a point where you're like, oh man, I played the perfect game. So, no, even when you win, even when you crush your opponent, you're like, there's like still mistakes, and being able to find them, and even if you don't find them, like there's a mistake in there, like you did something wrong. Even the best players in like the world, like they still make a couple mistakes every game, like maybe not big ones, but they're in there. It's just kind of always trying to figure out what those were, how you can play better, and just all the different iterations all the different decisions you can make during even like a movement phase is just really exciting to me.
Yeah, totally. So if you guys had to like pinpoint one specific aspect of the universe or the lore that you would say like is your your favorite part of it, whether or not that's like something as simple as like how cool chainswords are, or like the whole 9-year saga of the Horus Heresy. What's your favorite part of the lore and universe?
It's a couple. I'll take you go for it, Benjamin.
So for me, that's pretty easily just like the concept of how Tau compete with other races. Yeah, I know I'm talking about Tau. The idea that there's all these other races are like genetically superior, because part of the idea Tau is supposed to be genetically inferior to humans. They are actually weaker and slower than humans. This is why they're weapon skill 5. It's not because like they're not trained in hand-to-hand combat. They're just literally weaker than an average human being. They don't have very good eyesight. They're just literally less evolved than humans are. They don't have psychers, and there's like all these advantages against them. And the entire idea of like, well, then how do they possibly compete? It's like, well, they don't fight each other. There's no Tau on Tau violence, and this fact alone allows them to just focus on expanding their technology. And in the 5,000, 6,000 years that they've had to like create technology since they like climbed out of mud pits on their home planet, they've like vastly surpassed the Imperium, which has had 40,000 years to advance its technology. And like Tau weapons just make bolters look like super soakers. I just love that the idea of just like world peace is the secret to military supremacy. Even if there's fewer of us, just we don't fight each other, and it turns out you get a lot done when you're not busy having civil wars.
Yeah, I think for me the big one is the humanity. Like I have a soft spot for the Primarchs, but it's really humanity's saga, like in the long term, leading up to the Horus Heresy and how the Emperor is kind of always there to some extent. I remember like, oh yeah, humanity, they're cool. The Imperium objectively sucks, but they're like the kind of goodish. They're the protagonists, but they're not good guys. And I was like, yeah, I'm human. Fuck it, I'll go with that. They're cool. I like Space Marines. But when I learned more about the Imperium, the Emperor's idealism, how his goal was to really make humanity better, after like we peaked in the year 20K, I think, in like the Golden Age or the Dark Ages, depending on who you're talking about. And the idea that we were just so overpowered that our own technology destroyed us. And what you're seeing now is a copy of a copy to the power of 1,000. And it's still that terrifying. I think the whole like humanity reached its potential, shit went down to the point where the Eldar, an ancient race, were just like, we're not going to interact with you. We're just going to take a step back because picking a fight with you would be dumb. And I think the tragedy in that and the way the Emperor like almost got his golden ending, right? Like the Emperor set things up and played things pretty close, and he almost got humanity their happy ending. And the fact that it was just yanked away by a little boy's ego, I think it's like a beautiful tragedy.
Yeah, that's a very well thought out and eloquent answer. What got me into 40K's universe, as I alluded to before, is that I saw a chainsword and I thought it was the coolest fucking thing. And then I found out that, oh wait, there's a huge 8 foot tall super soldier that's a walking tank that holds the chainsword. You know what? I'm in. You know, I'm easy.
Fair
See,
enough.
Chris, I'm a writer by trade. I like stories, so yeah, I'm sappy like that.
See, I'm much more of a visual and like experiential sort of thing, like a very visceral type of person, as more of like a creative and artistic person. So the imagery of a chainsword was like, oh, that's like for something that is so advanced and in the future, and like it's supposed to be very very technologically advanced with like monomolecular like chainsaw teeth. It's at the end of the day, it's a fucking chainsaw. And that's what we're using 40,000 years into the future.
Yeah, I also love how they just make absolutely no sense. If you ever read any of the lore with chainswords, it's like they're always hitting each other and like, oh, teeth are flying off. It's like, if you use a chainsaw, if one tooth flies off, the whole thing doesn't work. No. Just lots of chain teeth fall off. You just keep your hacking at them. You'll get through their armor eventually. It's fine.
And what I'll say is this though. Here's the fun part. It doesn't matter.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's excellent.
That's why it's great, right? Like this isn't Lord of the Rings. This isn't Game of Thrones. I don't give a fuck about stupid plot holes like that. It's chainsword. I don't want to ask questions. No, but like just to expand on my answer, the other thing that got me into the lore was how Gulliman was portrayed in Dark Imperium.
Yeah, it was pretty good.
Yeah, one of the things that brought me back into 40K at with 8th edition is, so like I was pretty heavily involved in the Warhammer universe and just like reading and everything from like 3rd to 5th or 6th edition. And if you know your editions, basically plot wise, literally nothing changed between 3rd and 6th edition. So I kind of just like fell off and like didn't really pay much attention to it. And then my attention got brought to 8th edition, and holy shit, the plot advanced. There's a Primarch that's alive.
There's 3 actually.
There's like like Gilliman like came out of stasis. Like he's supposed to be there forever. With his wound ever slowly healing to the point where like it's like just kind of like is it just Ultramarines being hopeful?
No, he's better now. The ringer on that toaster went ding and he popped out.
Yep.
Full disclosure, I've only played 8th edition. I've technically played games of 9th edition, but until I've actually played a 9th edition tournament, I'm going to claim that I've only played 1 edition.
Yeah, I mean that's just you're just playing practice games.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I got like, even though like I didn't have too many models, like I would still play like 250, 500 point games of like 3rd or 4th edition. And let me tell you, if you never played it back then, or you haven't played Horus Heresy, holy hell, those rules are so much more obtuse than like 8th and 9th edition.
I've read those rules, man. It's a lot, and I want nothing to do with it.
Yeah, I've read a 7th edition codex. I didn't make any attempt to understand it, but I did put my eyes on the words, and I'm good. I'm very happy to play 8th.
Yeah, I think that's part of
9th.
the reason why we see like such a growth in the hobby is because 8th edition is so much easier to pick up, but still has that high skill ceiling.
Yeah. I also think that just like kind of nerd culture is becoming a lot more mainstream. It's just like a lot more people are more just like realizing that like, oh yeah, you can still just play games as an adult, and it's excellent. Also helps that a couple other major games have sort of been stumbling and or going under, and a lot of people are looking at 40k like, oh, that thing's been going for how many years? It's probably safe to start playing that one. They're probably
War Machine.
I know what games you guys were talking about.
Yeah, Magic's also had some serious issues in player retention recently. They have more banned cards in their standard format than they've ever had ever, and they've banned like 3 cards out of every new set. They're having issues. So a lot of people looking for other games to play.
Yeah, I mean, so I actually got into Magic in 2016. I started by work out. Everyone on my team was playing Magic, and the reason I couldn't really stay into it was like I bought all these cards and I had this deck, and then a new set came out, and we drafted and we did the whole thing. And I was like, wait, am I just gonna keep buying these pieces of paper forever?
Yeah.
Not that.
Correct. Accurate. That is how Magic works.
Well, no, yeah. But like versus with Warhammer, it's like I've rebought models and units. I have 2 Aramons. I have our OG Aramon and I have Aramon Reborn, as I call him. And I bought another Aramon not because I needed a new one, but because I wanted to repaint him because I thought I could do a better job, and I did, and I'm very proud of him.
Yeah, Fictional Shadow. That's what I'm saying. Is that I think a lot of people got out, and it's not, but if you play a game like that, you want to do something gaming wise, right? So some of them go to Warhammer. I still play Magic digitally, but I don't actually really play much paper anymore.
Yeah, I fire up Magic Arena now and then.
I'll play Hearthstone on my phone if I'm really bored. But that's because I grew up on Warcraft. I guess that was also an influence to me because orcs and all that.
Yeah. Let's see. What I had one more question for you guys. So, talking about the competitive aspect of Warhammer, we touched upon it having a high skill ceiling, that being important to us because there's always something to improve upon. But aside from that, what is it that appeals to you about the competitive aspect of it? Is it the community around it? Is it being able to try to theory craft and find hidden value in underappreciated units? Is it just just something that you can see yourself improving at all the time?
Well, I always enjoy a good theory crafted list, messing around with lists. Although in the end, I tended to play more streamlined, less surprising things. Like I don't think it like surprised anyone that like 9 broadsides was a reasonable list. Although it wasn't like a tier 1 list. People were all on Riptides, and I was still just like insisting on jamming my broadsides because I just love that model. Although at this point they've been hit over and over, and we're probably just stuck on Riptides. But that's a different discussion. I really enjoyed just the variety, like in the meta, where Games Workshop is really doing their best to make sure every faction's got something going on that can bring them, at the very least, to the mid tables, which is just kind of like an insane variety. Like even like going back to Magic, when I played Magic in like a healthy meta, you had like 6 decks. And like, if you're like, oh yeah, there's 6 lists that people play in Warhammer, you'd be like, oh, this meta's the worst. Like it's you can. I've gone to 16-person tournaments where every single person's on just like a wildly different list. It's possible that they're not even that there's literally not a repeated faction in the room because there's just that many factions in the game. And I really like just how much that makes you think because it's not like, oh yeah, this is how I play this matchup. This is how I play this matchup. And then sometimes you're like, You sit down, and your opponent's like, I brought 18 Sisters of Silence and 15 Custodes Hover Tanks. You're like, how do I play this matchup? What is this matchup? And you just have to think on your feet and like figure it out. Whereas a lot of other games, it's either you know how your matchups play up, or your opponent's deck or list or whatever is just like not capable of competing to the point where you don't really need to worry about it. Because they're just like literally doing suboptimal things to the point where they can't compete. And I just really like that aspect of like so many things are viable. Yeah, there'll always be top tier lists, but the tier 2 lists are not that far behind. It's always kind of exciting to see those.
Yeah. So the part about it, about the competitive aspect of it, to me is first and foremost is the community. Like, I know the competitive community gets a bad rap from the casual narrative players because, you know, like they had a bad experience with a, you know, whack player, you know, a win at all cost player, which in my experience is not a competitive player. They're just a dick.
Yep.
But when you get into the real competitive community, you know, you go to your locals, you're going to see like the same guys at, you know, a lot of these events. And, you know, it really becomes like a good community, and you just talk about your theory craft, you know, during your downtime between games. You know, you get to know each other, and everybody's, you know, very supportive. You can bounce ideas off of each other. But beyond the community, the thing that I like the most about the competitive aspect of this game is I can play the game that I want to. I can play the play style that I think is best for me or my army, or how I think, you know, like it'll play to the mission. I can, you know, pick out an army to play a denial style of play. I can try to go for board control. I can go shooty. I can go fighty. You know, there's just so many ways to go about it. And what's more is if you build it out right and you play your cards right, you know, each one of those things is 100% competitively viable, because they're, you know, otherwise, you know, you just see nothing but like, I don't know, like gun lines, and then that's just boring. Just throw a bucket of dice at your opponent's face and be done with it.
Yeah. I think for me it's also that diversity in that community. You see the same people, and a big part of it is I come from competitive fighting, and that's where I do put a lot of my competitive energy. And you know the guys you go against. Like, I'm a large person, but you're not friends. Like, Benjamin and I have been in tournaments together, and his lists hurt me on an emotional level, but we're friends. Like, there's no actual hard feelings. And having that community where it's like you can go against someone, like I've gone against another friend of ours, Kevin, a few times, and once in a GT, and every time it's like, oh hey, it's you again. It's never like, oh no, this is going to be terrible. And it's nice to see that. It's nice that you can play a game with your friends, and yeah, it's tournament, and you're not pulling any punches, and you're there to win. But you're also taking intent into account. Like when I'm playing with good players, I think it was after, and it was at Captain Con actually. I don't remember who I was playing with, but I was like, it was turn 2, and I didn't state that I had moved into Tactical Doctrine. And the guy looked at me and goes, "You're in Tactical Doctrine, right?" And I go, "Yeah, my bad." It was like the second or the third match of the day, and it was just like he knew. Like he knew he could have said, "No, you didn't call it, so you don't get to do it." But like, there's a level of kindness and fluidity in the community that I haven't seen in other competitive ones. Then the other side of it is you really do get to play how you want. GW uses it in their marketing, and I thought it was bull, but you do. I've run all kinds of lists, some better than others, some needed optimization. RIP Raven Guard Repulsor.
Oh no, that was a list.
Well, so, but this is the thing though. There was one gaping hole in my list.
Fair.
And it was the repulsor. Like, and Benjamin, you and I talked about it, and we said Plasma Inceptors would be a good replacement. And I tested it out with Plasma Inceptors. I got like a couple of games in before the pandemic happened, and yeah, I was really happy with it. And it was just one of those things where I was like, cool. I found a way to make plasma inceptors viable.
Yeah.
So there is something to be said about a game that lets you play how you want. You have to think. You have to really think and factor in the rule set, and you have to understand that if you want to play in a certain way, it might not be tier one. You're going to auto win, but you can win. There's no reason why you can't. You can make it happen if you play right.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
And I think one of the aspects of competitive Warhammer versus competitive fighting, because I've seen, I've gone to your tournaments and watched you fight, is when you're doing your jujitsu, you're just rolling around on a mat and grunting at each other for like 4 minutes and not saying anything.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
you're playing Warhammer, you're basically committing to spending the next 2.5-3 hours talking to this person across from the table from you, and because of that, there's the whole social contract thing, where yeah, like if you're on the internet and you're anonymous, you can say dickish things with reckless abandon and face zero consequences for it because it's the internet and you're anonymous. If you do that in real life at a at a tournament, especially like at a local, word's gonna get around, and it's while the community is growing, let's be real, this is still a very niche community, and nobody's going to want to play with you. So, even though nerds get a bad rap for being very socially awkward, I think for the most part, we all understand the social contract sort of thing, especially the competitive players, because we're at that table so often, and for so long. Whereas like I've had one very negative experience with a whack player, and it was at a 500 point game. I've never seen him at any actual like 2K or doubles tournaments or anything like that. Just like 500 point games, and it was no shit like the worst experience I've ever had playing 40K. That guy's not a competitive player. He plays like 500 point games, and he doesn't respect the social contract because it's 45 minutes and then he can just leave.
Yeah, I mean, the only whack game I've had was with the dude who beat me up with my Thousand Suns, who ended the game in an hour and kept judging me. I've carpooled with him to tournaments where I'll go to a tournament and he'll be doing a local game for a different system. Like I'd be going to AOS and he'd be playing 40K at that same spot. And he'll screech and scream about how these lists are broken and these lists work and I know everything and I'm on top of the meta. And I've never seen him in a tournament. I've never seen him go to a brand tournament. He'll talk about his faction and he'll say how you can only play them in one way and after this they're dead. And now I'm seeing that faction being played like 5 different ways. And it's like, yeah, you're a net lister. And you just want to.
Those same people will also use netlist as a pejorative.
Yeah, I've had very similar experiences where I find a lot of the competitive community to be like just fun to play against. And most of my like really negative Warhammer experiences have been at like casual events where it's just like, why? Why? Like there's nothing. There's either we're like playing in like a for funsies tournament where there's like almost nothing on the line, or like the most prize money is actually going to go to like best sportsman or whatever. In first place is just like, congratulations, you beat everyone else, I guess. And it's just strange, and like you guys were saying too, like a lot of the more casual players also like assume they have a very strong concept of like what the meta looks like, and I like to think I do, but if I'm playing in any tournament and my opponent puts something down across from me, I'm like, I'm going to assume that because he gets to a competitive tournament and he chose to bring these models, that they do something. Like there's something in there that I'm probably unaware of that's like actually very good, even if it looks like a pile of garbage to me. And until proven otherwise, like I'm not going to insult my opponent. If they tell me at the end, like, or even at the beginning, I'm a new player, I'm not really sure what I'm doing, I'll certainly offer them pointers. But like, yeah, people innovate, people net lists. It's however you want to get better. Like both of those are reasonable ways of getting better at the game.
Yeah, and I mean, Benjamin, even like in that repulsor list that I brought, that we now talk about, that list that's filled with shame. When we
I would never mock one of your lists, Omer.
Well, no. I'm filled with shame now. I'm filled with shame now. But I remember beforehand, like before the first day, you and I talked about our list, and I walked you through my plan, and your response was like, that could work. And it wasn't dismissive, that could work. You said, with you seem to have your rerolls with some good dice and some good positioning, you could win. You could do well. And in a lot of that game, and in most of my games, I played things right. The dice didn't always go in my favor on one person's side or the other. But, and this is the big but, it was very much I spent my points unwisely, and I proved that. But there was never a sense of mocking. You were encouraging, you were supportive. Even Chris was, which was surprising.
Whoa,
Yeah,
hey.
You can
Hey.
you can generally get some amount of value out of almost any model. It's just like, could you get more value somewhere else for fewer points?
Yes, for sure.
Why are you implying that I'm mean?
Wait, sorry. No, I'm saying you're mean. I wasn't implying anything.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Yeah, the competitive 40k community, ladies and gentlemen, we're very nice to each other. Go Yomer.
No, but it is something unreal where I found myself cheering for my opponent to make their 10-inch charge and win the game. Or like I've seen where, all right, hey, we don't know whose game it's going to be. It's all hinging on a 9-inch charge. And I've played against opponents where I failed that 9-inch charge, and I'm like sad. And they're like, I'm sad for you. I'm going to shoot your guy off the board without mercy, but also, I'm sorry, buddy.
Yeah, for sure.
And you don't see that in other places. You don't see that in other games.
Yeah, like I used to box, and yeah, you didn't see that if you missed a punch. If you did that, then you just got punched back in return.
Yeah, but even unless you're in a very specific kind of community, even in the after that, like no one's gonna say, "Oh, you were close," or "You needed to do this." Like people can be really mean in a lot of other sports.
Oh
And
yeah, definitely. I used to play StarCraft.
Yeah, like even StarCraft, but there is an inherent kindness in competitive 40k that I haven't seen in any other competitive sport.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, it goes back to the whole social contract.
Yeah, especially with like locals, like tournaments are great for practice, but if you want to really push yourself to be better, you're going to need to get practice games in against multiple other people, multiple other play styles, multiple other kinds of lists. You're going to need to be able to like go, hey, I'm going to a tournament and I've never played against, or I have very little practice against Eldar, and none of my close friends play Eldar. Like you're going to need to be able to like Facebook message that random Eldar player who goes to your tournaments, be like, hi, I'm not a terrible person. Could you please help me practice? Like I've done that. I've like messaged people who I'm like, I don't really know you super well, but I played you at this tournament. Would you be willing to go to the same place again and like play against me with that Eldar list? Because literally none of my friends play Eldar. And I need to practice against it because I want to go to Nova and have like an idea of what Eldar Flyer looks like against like this weird list I'm playing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, like,
So speaking of different like play styles, what is your guys' preferred play style? Like what was it like? Like you can talk about what it was like previously, or how it evolved, or what you're doing now.
when I started the game, I thought I was going to be I want to fight. I want to like charge in and fight everybody and be a melee army. But as I played the game more, I like flexibility. All of my lists can do a little bit of everything at any given point. Like when I was running Thousand Suns, rubrics are going to be a shooting line. That we're talking 8th edition here. I'd have rubrics as a shooting line, Demon Princess as melee monsters. I'd bring Magnus, or I'd soup in knights. But I always like to have flexible lists. Even like part of why I'm enjoying Custodes so much is that you do have flexibility there. And it's the same with Space Marines. But it's also why, as I think, and I hate myself for saying this, I think Tau is one of the coolest looking armies in the game because I love Gundams.
Yeah.
But they're not flexible. And that really throws me off of them. Because you have one play style with Tau. I know you can do other things if you try hard enough, but you really have one play style. versus like if I play Space Marines, I can choose to be Ultramarine and have like and kind of be good at kind of be okay at everything. I could be Iron Hands and shoot things, or I could be White Scars and run at your face, or a Blood Angel, or a Space Wolf. So it's flexibility.
Yeah, definitely. Um, yeah, I think my preferred play style it's evolved over time. Um, when I first picked up Dark Imperium, I obviously had the Death Guard, so then I picked up like 3 Plague Burst crawlers. And I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna be hard to kill, and then just be annoying and just sit on things and just say, "Come at me," And as I expanded my Chaos army and Lord Discordance became a thing, I got you know a few of those, and then was like, you know what? I'm just gonna go all out into fighty and just have a bunch of melee blenders, you know. And now I'm starting to transition to over to White Scars, and like I'm kind of doing that mix of fighty and shooty, but with a main focus on mobility and flexibility. So yeah, again, it goes to show there's just so much variety and play style, and if you've got the models, you can make it happen, which is part of the reason why I always tell people, do not sell your models, because everything old can become new again.
RE Scarab or rubrics.
Yep.
Yeah, that unit that was completely unplayable, just somehow completely ridiculous now. So for me personally, the first army I ever picked up was Tau. And I actually picked them up because I was playing with a very casual community, and I knew that I was going to do whatever I did competitively because I'm a fairly competitive person. And at the point where I bought them, we were in Index, and outside of Commander Spam, Tau were awful. And I played terrible Tau to the best of my ability, and did really well, but like with a fairly casual community. And then the Tau Codex came out, and I realized that I was going to have to pick up a second army to be more casual with, because the Tau Codex was like one of the better codexes at the time. So I picked up Demons, and I ended up kind of converting that into just a Zinch things, because again, we were in indexes, so detachments were weird, and just like Thousand Suns could lead pink horrors into battle, and there was no penalty for it because there were no chapter tactics. So I ended up with a bunch of Thousand Suns and Demons, and it turns out that both these armies have the same play style. You may not realize it because they feel different, but actually what both of those armies are is a super durable screen that are in front of some sort of damage dealing mechanism that can't be interacted with, and for Tau, that's Riptides with shield drones, or commanders just hiding behind anything. And for Thousand Suns and Demons, that's powerful Psykers hiding behind walls of Plague Bearers and Horrors. And I find myself continually going back to that playstyle whenever I end up being on a new list. I just look at it, I'm like, this is just a different version of really resilient things to hide behind with my damage dealers. It's like every list I've built so far, it's like, this is just Alpha Legion Obliterators hiding behind Plague Bearers. This is Thousand Suns hiding behind Indestructible Rubric Marines. This is Commanders hiding behind Shield. Like, I find myself almost gravitating to that sort of play style, because it sort of brings you to this like attrition game where you're very much figuring out the rate at which you're willing to burn your resources, your defensive and offensive resources, against your opponent, to figure out like the correct balance of these two things in order to win the game while not being tabled or like running out of defensive things. I just find that having like the separation between like, these are my offensive units, these are my defensive units, rather than having like my units being able to do both things at the same time. I kind of really enjoyed that playstyle. Although now with Rubric Marines and Scarab Occult with Psychic Awakening, they're a little bit able to play both sides of that because they can clear infantry pretty easily, but are also extremely tanky.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think we've had a lot of great discussion on how we got into 40K, why we love the universe so much, why we got into the competitive side of things and what keeps us there, and how we like to play the game. Is there anything else that you guys want to bring up, about this topic about, what 40K means to us, more or less?
I think I had everything that I want to, although I do think that I do have a couple of things that we could discuss outside of this topic for the last couple of minutes. If you guys are all set with this topic.
Omar?
Yeah.
Yeah, all right, shoot.
All right. So I think it's worth talking about several things that we mentioned in previous episodes where we were like, we need FAQs on this before we can really talk about it. And we've now received those FAQs. They received them yesterday in a complete mess of a format, and then we received them again today in an updated format. So in no particular order, let's start off with the fixed character targeting. It is now characters do not block other characters unless that character has 10 or more wounds.
Yep.
And vehicles of 8 or more wounds block now. So, because they accidentally wrote a really goofy version of the rule yesterday where it was just models with 9 or less wounds couldn't block, which meant that Genius Eater cult models with 2 familiars are a 3-man unit and therefore could character block. For themselves, it was a problem. But then also, like, small transports like Star Weavers, Shadow Weavers, and like the Drakari Venoms just like didn't protect characters anymore. So like if the Venom span armies, if you had a character like sitting on the ground surrounded by 10 Venoms, like that character was just targetable. That rule's gone. So now it's vehicles with 8 or more wounds are character protecting, and any character with 9 or fewer wounds is not, regardless of keywords, number of models, all that stuff. What do you guys think about that?
Seems reasonable. Seems fair. Like,
Yeah, because I mean, like previously, if you had 2 demon princes next to each other, you couldn't target them.
Yep.
Which doesn't really make sense, and it definitely wasn't fitting in with the intent of the rule. I mean, I get it, rules is written, that's how it was played, but it's
like Staples having OPSEC as an army for a minute.
Yeah, like I remember at Captain Con, the top table, I had like the goofiest game where I pushed my entire army up the center of the table, and my opponent was trying to high tanks behind buildings and like his back edge, and I had my 3 Chaplain Dreadnoughts. Yes, I know I'm a monster. Walking up the 2 sides of the table with just absolutely nothing in front of them, but because I had a blob of guys in the middle of the table, they were more or less intargetable my opponent's entire list. And it felt like the dumbest thing. You're like, yes, this is a Dreadnought in a field, but there's a bunch of intercessors in that building in the middle of the table, so your tank can't shoot at him. And like all that nonsense is gone, and I think that's very healthy for the game.
Yeah.
All right. Next thing that they FAQ'd, they fixed Space Wolves. So for those of you who don't know, Space Wolves had OBSEC, and the thing that they replaced OBSEC with was their doctrines and hateful or shock assault and bolter discipline, which was just like a complete nonsense FAQ, and that's gone. And good. I'm not sure there's a ton to discuss about it, but we did talk about it a bit last week.
Yeah, we talked about it a bit last because like at first we thought it was a typo or a mistake that every Space Wolf unit had OBSEC, and then GW released an FAQ and seemingly doubled down on it, and then they FAQ'd it again, and then called it back.
Yeah, okay. So that's gone. I don't know if we get any more about talking about it. All right, other big things. We have an official ruling on the point cost of a couple different models. So the Taunar is up like 300 points, basically back to where it's 8th edition point level. I can play around with all the other 2,000 point Lord of Wars and be unplayable. It's not 2,000 points. It's like 1,300. You can play it in like 5 shield drones and call it a day. Whatever. It's it's silly. You'll still see them at tournaments because they're fun. No one's ever going to win a GT with one. We can go back to not really worrying about it. The one that does matter is that we were talking a lot about the Imperial and Chaos Knight Castellan and what the correct point costs were of those. And we have it official. The Chaos one came down 100 points, so they are both 620. So a Knight Castellan is 620 points. So run with it. What do you guys think?
I might buy a Castellan.
If I played Imperial Knights, I would buy a Castellan.
Yeah,
I mean, no, I might not buy a Castellan. I don't know.
I'm thinking about it. It's something to think about now because that's
previously before, if you were playing Chaos Knights, it's out of the question.
Yeah, the Imperial one is still significantly better than the Chaos one. It has like better warlord traits. It has better chapter tactics,
better stratagem,
better stratagems. But the Chaos one can be played in the same army as a model with Death Hex, which is terrifying.
Yes, and so the Chaos Knight Castellan, because I can't remember what the actual stupid spiky name is. Yeah, it's playable now. It's viable. You know, you can actually like make an argument for taking it.
Death Hex, it takes an invulnerable save off of an enemy model.
Right.
So
No, I was thinking of warp time.
Prescience or warp time. Yeah. So you can like if your opponent's playing knights and you're playing knights, you're like, I'm gonna Death Hex your knight, and then my Castellan just like
gonna obliterate
completely
it.
destroys it.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, no, Death Hex, Warp Time, Prescience, that's kind of like the trifecta of Chaos spells.
I think that we might see Imperial ones. Like I was saying, there's a really silly Warlord trait and Chapter Tactic combination in the Psychic Awakening, Engine War, where they are going to roll 2 extra dice and drop the 2 lowest for every weapon to determine the number of shots. That's just such ridiculous consistency with the firepower on that model, given that it has 4 different random shot weapons. It just has so much firepower now. It's like even more than it did in its heyday, which is a little scary.
It's
definitely.
I think when the 9th meta starts popping up, Castellans are making a comeback because GW wants to saw knights.
Yeah, it'll be interesting too, because I think right now the 9th meta is looking like a lot of aggressors, and you need to be able to kill those aggressors so that your infantry can stand anywhere close to the middle of the table, and a Castellan can just pick up a bunch of aggressors.
That's
yeah,
true.
Salamander aggressors and Ultramarine aggressors, very scary.
Yeah, it's gonna be a lot.
Shit, even as White Scars, I might pick up some aggressors.
Yeah, like I think aggressors are going to be everywhere. I think the Castellan is a real chance. Trying to think of the other FAQs now off the top of my head. I think those are the 3 big ones that we were like, we just need FAQs on this before we can make any official or I mean not official, but before we like really talk about them.
Heavy cover, they made that make sense now.
Yes, heavy cover makes sense now. It actually works for the defender rather than the attacker.
Yep.
Thank goodness. Omar, you want to explain that one? Or Chris?
Oh yeah. So previously, if you were in heavy cover and your opponent charged you, your opponent would get +1 to their save, which made 0 sense. So now they reverse that so that if you're in heavy cover, you get +1 to your save, which makes sense, because if you were going up against a fighting army and you had some heavy cover between you and them, it made absolutely 0 sense to touch that piece of terrain.
Yeah, you're playing against world leaders. Like, no, my Terminators are sitting out in the open. They're not touching that building. They will never touch that building. And now it's like, no, they're in the building. They get bonus on the saves for being in the building. This is going to make things like Terminators, Centurions, anything with a 2-up save really scary to charge inside of the building because they're just not going to die.
Yeah. Ganny and Jay in the chat says, I don't think we will see too many knights unless they get OPSEC and count as 10 models. So Chaos Knights have the Warlord trait for that, and
Imperial Knights have a relic for it.
Yeah. So you won't get it as like an army-wide thing, but you can definitely get your pop that on like a melee knight and just charge up the board and take an objective away from your opponent.
Yeah, I'm not saying that we're going to see full knight armies like crushing the meta. You will see people take full knight armies and they will be fairly successful. But like you're going to see like 1,000 points of knights, and by that I mean like a Castellan and 2 war dogs, and then like 1,000 points of like infantry to stand on objectives, where that Castellan blows your opponent off the table. So the Castellan at 620 points with the new upgrades to it are like really scary. It does an insane amount of damage. I don't know if any of you guys played against like the old House Raven Castellan.
Oh yes, I did.
House Raven Castellan has more firepower now than it did in its heyday. It actually does more damage now with the Psychic Awakening than it did before.
That's insane.
It has warlord traits now that can make it do even more damage.
Yeah. So I think I might buy Castellan.
Yeah.
I've already
Right,
got the 2 war dogs, so.
But remember, like we were talking about in our previous podcast, it's really bad at playing the mission. Like,
I know, but like I wanted to buy Castellan, so. I'm
Like-
gonna-
fair enough.
Chris and I have both wanted a Castellan for a while because we like knights, because knights are awesome. And
See,
I
it,
held
like,
off.
so when I was like 12 and I first got into Warhammer, I wanted to buy a Land Raider because I thought they were super cool. It just, I didn't have the money to buy a Land Raider, and then when I got back in the 40K and I had like a big boy job and disposable income, I could buy a Land Raider now, except they weren't good, so I didn't. And then I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm an adult. I've wanted a Land Raider since I was 12. I'm gonna buy a fucking Land Raider. So now I have a Land Raider, and I put Centurions in it.
Yeah.
there you go. Yeah, no, it's,
Yeah,
like I think buying those like I wanted Primarchs, and I over time I bought Mortarion and Magnus because I wanted all 3, and I'm hoping GW releases a 4th.
Yeah. As someone who owns a Castellan, I would prefer you guys didn't buy Castellans because I'd rather fire my Castellan at aggressors than enemy knights.
Definitely buying Castellan then.
Yeah,
Shucks.
just to spite you.
No,
Unfortunate.
it's because I know I'm gonna see you like on the top table. So
Our Castellans can just shoot at each other. It'll be great.
it'll be like 2018 all over again.
But no Blood Angel Smash Captains.
No, well, not until the Codex comes out.
Yeah, and then they'll have 4 damage Thunder Hammers.
Maybe.
Yeah.
All right, so I think we covered everything that we wanted to cover. Anything else that you guys wanted to touch on?
No, I think that was a lot of the things that we had talked about before. GW has finally figured out how to write FAQs, and we know how things work now.
Congratulations, GW's new or super old rules writer.
They
All
figured it out. We're proud of them.
Yes.
All right, everybody. Well, thanks for listening to this week's show. We stream the show live every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern on Twitch. Actually, if I say it now, it'll be wrong because I can actually change the Twitch channel name tomorrow, which I will. But in any case, follow and subscribe. We're also anywhere you can find podcasts like Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Like, review, subscribe there too. It really does help. There's also a Twitter where I shitpost about things sometimes. So yeah. Anyway, this has been the 3D6 Charge podcast. Bye for
Chris,
now.
There we go. Johnny J. Or Johnny New and J. I'll come up there when I get a car. So give me a minute.
Do you even have a license yet?
No, so that's why I said give me a minute.
Okay. Like I was saying before you interrupted me, this has been the 3D6 Charge podcast. Bye for now, and don't roll any